we as the audience go, oh, his mom died, his brother died, oh, that's horrible. But him as the character is not evoking the emotions you expect from someone who's lost their mother and their brother and could possibly lose the woman they love. Like, all of these elements at play here, Thor should be like an emotional wreck, but he's just like, whatever.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of A Lost Plot, the podcast by storytellers for storytellers so that we can tell better stories ourselves. As always, I'm your host, Maverick, and today we have back with us one of our greatest co-hosts, Andrew, to review the second installment in the Thor franchise. That's right, we're talking about Thor the Dark World. That was the one released 2 years after the first one, the 2013 American superhero film with the story by Don Payne and Robert Rodat, I don't know how to say his last name. Screenplay by Christopher L. Yost, Christopher Marcus, and Stephen McFeely, and directed by Alan Taylor. So, as always, what were those first thoughts, Andrew, when you watched this film? What is your impression?
If you thought the first Thor was basic, boy, are you in for a surprise, because this is even less, but more in so many ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I think it's pretty safe to assume that this one is not as good as most of the other ones in the series. I will say most. And there is a reason that if you didn't like the first one, you're probably not going to like the second one. Even if you did like the first one, you still might not like the second one. Haven't heard Andrew's review, but I'm already getting the impression he wasn't as big of a fan. So, we'll get into that review in just a second. But before we do, if you're not familiar with Thor the Dark World, Andrew, you want to give everyone a summary of what the Thor the Dark World is about?
There's an ether. The ether is a red liquid. Millennia ago, it was fought over by dark elves and Asgardians. The ether was locked away. Now, in today's day and age, Jane Foster finds it. Thor tries to take it out of her. It doesn't want to go out. Thor and Odin have differing opinions on how to deal with this ether problem because the dark elves are back and there's like a convergence thing. And then they have a battle, you know?
Nice.
I feel like most of the time you should be able to sum up a movie with like some themes and elements at play, but this movie just doesn't have that. So
yeah, wow,
we
got on that already. That's crazy. Wow, the alignment is coming together. Let's see what those numbers are now. Are they going to be close? Andrew, what did you give this movie?
Technically as a 3.05, but I'm just going to give it a 3. So
You did bad, Andrew, because I got lower than you. I got a 2.5, baby.
That doesn't make me bad, okay? First of all, I reserve low ratings for truly horrible movies like Mufasa and Joker Foyer Ado.
I mean, those both deserve bad ratings, but this one, I mean, a 3 and a 2.5 are both pretty low overall in the scale. It's not in the scale of, I mean, we're getting to the scale of like, this is horrendous. But even giving this review, I was at the stage where I go, okay, 2.5. It's at the point where I kind of enjoyed parts of this movie, all things being said. But I would not say I would go out of my way to watch this movie under normal circumstances. So that's what you get. Yeah, let's get right into it. What is your thoughts on that opening scene? What is, they have you introduced to the Dark Elves and to this whole fight with Odin's father and the fight over the ether, and then you have Thor coming in to bring peace to the galaxy. Good? Bad? Why? What did you think when you watched this?
In terms of the places I gave this movie points, I probably gave the opener the most points out of anything. It's very Lord of the Rings-esque, okay? I don't think there's much you can do wrong in terms of this type of opener when it's like just background knowledge. You're setting up an epic battle. There's like this one relic or item that everyone's fighting over. The fate of the universe is at stake. It's just setting up the stakes for the movie. And I think all things considered had some great potential here. You had some great elements you could have brought up. You could have made the villain interesting. You could have made the conflict interesting, but that's not what we get. And so, in terms of like, I actually broke it down this time. Okay, in terms of the points that I gave it. So, in terms of how the opening scene and it keeping my attention, I got 0.4 out of 0.5. So that's pretty good,
Yeah.
all things considered. But that's the most points any of these things got from me.
Yeah.
So
I mean, and that's true. And you have to come to the question of how much are you going to make the beginning one a monologue explaining how everything works. They did it before in the first one. Doing it in this one isn't that it's not breaking their already established pattern here. So it's fine. The only thing I would note beyond that is that this, and I realized this after watching it this time, is this is the first time you really see what becomes the Marvel established mold of opening movies, where it is, let us have the hero come into the conflict, totally beat up everyone, reestablish his powers, reestablish their friends, all of that stuff in a nice little fighting sequence at the beginning of the film. And you get that here, and it's not bad. But it's also like something you start to see much more going forward, right? You start to see that especially in later Thor movies. You see that in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. You see that start to sprinkle all over the Marvel Cinematic Universe from here on out. But this is like the first movie that I actually distinctly recall seeing this and going, oh, this is them starting this off, right? So it, once again, not bad. There were several times where they do something and I'm like, okay, it's not bad. I appreciate it in one regard because of how they did it in this movie, and maybe there's some nuance there that I just didn't catch. But it's almost like they looked at this movie of all movies and said, "Oh, see, it went fine, it worked. Let's do that again, and do those elements again in future movies," which then does suck. So those are for later movies, right? Other reviews we've already done or will do for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm just pointing that out here so that you're aware of it going forward, that this is a continuing reoccurring theme for them. But that being said, yeah, the opener was fine. It was great. Nothing really terrible to note about that. What was your thoughts of Thor in this movie, though?
I mean, me and Maverick talk about Marty McFly back and forth.
I was thinking that, brother. I was like, we could have such beef on anything else, but we will come to terms on this one. Go ahead. You cook this up, baby.
I love Thor as a character, okay? In terms of the original like 6 Avengers, I think Thor is probably my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are some really cool world building things that you get with Asgard and with the lore surrounding Thor. I think that unfortunately the MCU does him a massive injustice as a character. And it really, really starts with this movie. I think the first movie it's a good intro. They don't really get into the deep like the mechanics of like Thor like completely forgetting who he is when he goes back to Earth. So they kind of change that, which is fine. I think that all things considered, the first movie was pretty good. And we've had this discussion. The second movie, though, is where they really start to go downhill because Thor becomes the stereotypical punch his way through all of his problems hero. And he's like really powerful. He's got his hammer. Now, I will say, without getting too far ahead, I think Thor Ragnarok breaks this mold, but then we jump right back into it with Thor Love and Thunder. And it's like we had a little reprieve there real quick, but Marvel just didn't know how to help themselves. So I think his character, in terms of flaws, it's interesting for me because I'm watching this going, I want to say yes, he has flaws because he is, for lack of a better term, giving flaws. Okay, like he acts like a man who has a lot of like weight on his shoulders, a lot of responsibility. He's been through a lot and he's struggling with how to balance all of these, almost like a Superman-esque type hero who always makes the right decision, but there are all of these impossible decisions put before him. And then I thought about it and I went, but they're not giving him any of those decisions.
Yep.
He's just being a whiny little piece of crap throughout this movie. And it's like, he has such easy decisions, and the most difficult one that's put before him is kind of still like a no-brainer. At least that's the way it's presented. There's not really much debate in his mind, if that makes sense. Like, It may be a difficult decision, but he's made up his mind
Mm-hmm.
instantly before he even has the conversation with his father. And so, in terms of flaws or like things that are missing from his life, I mean, you could also make the argument that Jane Foster is this thing that's missing from his life. But then you find out, oh no, the Rainbow Bridge is rebuilt, and he could have gone back to see her any
Thank
time.
you.
But and he does as soon as there's the slightest issue. He's like, oh, we're going back. And it's like, okay, so I guess that wasn't going to be a plot point in this
Mm-hmm.
movie. So yeah, he's not really lacking anything in terms of what deep rooted like needs does his character not have. He doesn't have major struggles as a character. He doesn't even really have an arc in this movie. He's just
Mm-hmm.
Thor.
Well, it's very much like they took the arc in the first film, and he became this noble leader of sacrificial worth, right? And then they just say, he is this noble leader with sacrificial worth. And it goes, okay, so what is he going to do from here? He's going to continue to be the same man he was at the end of the last movie, which is consistent from like a character point of view, but in regards to making a now new compelling story for us to watch and learn and grow from and understand new values. There's none of that because you don't have a character who has anything to grow from in this film. So, 100%. I thought it was kind of ironic because in the first film you have Odin, who is this character who very much is presented as an all-wise father figure who knows what's best, and Thor will just not listen to him. In this film, you almost get the situation reversed, where Odin is this person who will not listen to reason and will not think clearly, and instead it is Thor, his all-wise, all-knowing, benevolent son, who will do the right thing despite what shenanigans his father gets up to are. And it's like, okay, well, now you've just detracted from Odin's character in this film for the sake of making Thor an even more perfect character. So, what are we doing? I don't know. It was rather unfortunate to see both of those things. But yes, we are on the same page. Thor is the new capstone character. We can let all other ones we've had beef with fall to the side now and
Yes.
talk about Thor, the Dark World. So, what were your thoughts on? Well, we'll get to the side characters near the end. So let's talk about, I mean, why Thor is even part of this conflict, right? You have the ether, which is found by Jane Foster, and then zap, he's back on Earth, baby, and he's here to bring justice and to solve problems and to have his girlfriend meet his dad and mom. What were your thoughts on integrating Jane into Asgard and that impetus that brings the Dark Elves to Asgard? Furthering, like, really bringing the conflict together, more or less.
I mean, it feels like this whole movie is just them trying to come up with a compelling reason for Thor to be a part of it. Like the first portion of the movie is, why is Thor here even? Okay, the realms were thrown into chaos after Loki was king of Asgard. Which, just a completely different side note, we don't really know why they're thrown into chaos. Like, do they just, like, the assumption I guess is that they devolved over time, but also this movie doesn't take place that long after the first Thor movie.
Yeah, well,
And so
yeah.
it's like,
Sorry, go ahead. Finish your thought.
well, it's just like there's not, they give us a lot of background for the
Mm-hmm.
ether and then like no background for this conflict that's building up across the nine realms, which I personally think that had a lot more potential for actually building on Thor's character rather than using the ether. But we can get into that later when we talk about the Dark Elves as
Yeah,
a
that's
whole.
true, and that is a reoccurring theme of this movie. Is they had potential here, but then why did you do that? Why did you do this? What are you doing here? Like, they're it wasn't that they
Yes.
didn't have good material to work with. It's just that they took the Play-Doh, squished it in their hands, and dropped it on the table and said, "Ta-da! Here we are." It didn't really do anything.
Yeah.
So, 100% on that point. I initially, when I was thinking it, for some reason, I was just thinking, oh, they rebelled, and now Asgard was putting them back under their dominion. But then I thought, well, in their hypothetical universe, Asgard's supposed to be this benevolent, like, leadership, like, government that everyone just wants to follow for some reason. They have very, like, lovey-dovey governmental structures in cinematic universe hierarchies, unless it's bad. So I that even give, I guess I gave him a benefit of a doubt and then realized that doesn't actually make a ton of sense the way they structure things. So I don't know. Good question.
Yeah.
Did you think that introducing Malekith to like he has this almost like homing beacon on the ether, which brings him to Asgard and chasing Jane Foster there? Did you think that him coming to Asgard made sense and him tracking her down and whatnot, killing friggin' Frigga or whatever her name is?
Malekith is the most stereotypical big bad who ever existed. Okay, like he is just the formula is X big bad wants to dominate X location. That is the formula for the most basic big bad in all of storytelling, and that is what Malekith is. He just wants to dominate the entire universe. So it's a little bit bigger than say Loki with just Earth. Um, but it's just like he has no real motive other than I want eternal night. Ooh, darkness, scary.
Right.
And I was thinking about it, and I was like, the the ice giants had more compelling motive as villains than Malekith, and he got a whole
Yeah.
freaking movie.
Yeah.
The ice giants had like a
Right.
few scenes, and you got more from them than you got from all of Malekith. Because like the ice giants, there's tension there. There was a war fought there as Odin is trying to quell this this warlike race. And Laufey doesn't like being pushed under boot. And so an insurrection of ice giants, albeit not super compelling, would have been more compelling than scary dark elves.
True. Yeah. I mean, it was supposed to be an even deeper, older grudge, more or less, right? Or feud between Asgard and the Dark Elves. Hypothetically, once again, great content to work with. But do they? No, because Malekith is like, let me awake and murder everyone. Oh, here I am. Bye bye. Boom, boom, boom. So it's you know what? Yeah, there's nothing else to say. I don't know what else to say. It's sad.
I mean, like, instead we got scenes of Dr. Selvig in his underpants at an old folks' home. And it's like, what did that do for us as the audience? For the story, nonetheless. Like, why couldn't we get like some interesting dialogue between Malekith and Odin, or some sort of backstory as to why there's so much tension between Asgardians? Why is it the Asgardians that go to war with them? Like, if they really are trying to wipe out the universe, why don't we have the ice giants or other people fighting with them? Were they on their side? I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of power politics that could have been brought into play with the Asgardians being the, like, essentially the kings of the nine realms,
Right.
the monarchs. Similar to how like the Baratheons are the kingly family of the seven kingdoms in Game of Thrones. Like, there's definitely tension there. People aren't just, oh well, we obviously are friends with the king just because he's the king. Like, I think this movie had a lot of potential to go explore that route, but did none of that.
Yeah, and that's it's potential, and I think it's important to point those things out, right? That it could have gone this way, it could have gone that way.
Yeah.
Because yes, the Dark Elves inherently, like, even I remember watching this when this first came out and talking to people who were bigger fans than me, saying, "Oh, the Dark Elves are super cool." When you're talking about the comic series, right? Big nerds who are super excited to see these characters come into play, and then when you see it in the theaters, you go, "Oh crap, what was that?" And that's, I don't think that just disappointed the fans. I think it actually disappointed the people watching, because you look at that and you go, well, it's just a stereotypical bad guy, right? Insert this into any other movie and you're going to get basically the same thing. Formulaic, like he said. Motive, because I'm evil, right?
Yeah. The only Thor villain I was more disappointed with was honestly Gore the God Butcher, because he's Gore the God Butcher and they made him into it.
He butchered himself.
I can't even say. Let's move on.
What did you think of the themes? Did you think that they had themes of honor and love and this idea about authority and responsibility? Wasn't it a rich, theme deep movie?
I spent so much time on this point, okay? I was really trying to think of one. I'm like, all right, let me Sean Nolan this crap and think up some sort of theme they're
Mhm.
going for, okay? If you could pull out that theme for Star Wars Episode 8, I could pull out a theme for this movie. And then I went, wait a minute, I don't like Star Wars Episode 8. Why would I try to justify another bad movie? Um, that said, I came up with 3 possible themes. Extremely weak themes
Mhm.
to prove my point that there is no true theme here. 1, love conquers all. Absolutely retarded. That's a stupid theme. This is not a Disney movie. I guess it is,
Well,
but it shouldn't
I don't
be.
know that it was when this was
This is
made,
stupid.
though, right?
I think Disney owned them with Iron
Really?
Man, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
No.
I mean, I
I'll
can
look
look
it
it
up.
up,
You
or
keep
you can
talking.
while I'm.
You have 3 themes to go over.
Okay. Um, the second one is about making your own path in life. Okay, it's okay, but it's weak at best. It's kind of like Thor is meant to be king, but he doesn't really want to. The unfortunate thing is this theme isn't explored until the end of the movie. Quite literally, the very last scene of the movie when Thor goes, "I'm not ready to be king," and it's like, where is this coming from? Why didn't we talk about
Exactly.
this earlier? Why
Thank
weren't you
you.
struggling with this entire movie? Why are you all of a sudden telling your who you think is your dad? Oh, I just realized I don't have what it takes to be king, Dad.
Yeah.
Bye. No. We need a reason why you're struggling
Right.
with this.
Well, especially
What the
because
what?
every other conflict at that
This
point had been resolved, right?
Yeah. And at no point was Thor going, I can't be king. It was, Dad, you're an idiot. Let me take control
Yes,
here.
exactly.
What? The third one is like, I don't even know how I would put this in words. It's I have it written down here, okay? Let me think through this. Oh, it's like a question of how ought a king to deal with a threat. And that's kind of like the difference between Thor and Odin. Thor is more of a proactive character who wants to go out and meet the threat head on. Odin's the one who wants to sit back and wait for the threat to come to him. I don't think this is a very strong theme. And the thing is, it gets completely watered down by the fact that there's none of this debate. Like, it happens in one scene. And it's like, oh, that could be interesting. I'm not sure where
Mhm.
you'd go with it, and I'd have to think about that more. But we don't get any of that because as soon as Thor's done with that conversation, he's like, all right, we're going to save Natalie Portman's character, Jane Foster, and we're going to break Loki out. And there's none of that conversation that happens at all throughout the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
None of it. And so, like, again, no
Yeah.
themes here. Zip, nada. I don't know what we as the audience are supposed to come away from with this movie.
I mean, and to answer the earlier question, they actually had been purchased by Disney at this point, so you are right on that one. They were purchased in 2009, and this came out in 2013, so it had been 4 years since they'd been purchased.
Yeah, and I think Iron Man came out in 08, so they purchased it right after the first Iron Man.
Anyways, the only one I thought that might have a stand there was one about maybe how do you respond to, and it's kind of similar to what Andrew just said, but how do you respond to a higher authority, and what do you do when they call you to do something you don't think you should do, right? And reacting to authority appropriately regarding the situation. You get that kind of with Thor and Odin, kind of with Heimdall and Odin, but that's pretty much it. And so it's pretty like yeah, they have nothing. I'm not going to defend them any more than that because they don't deserve it, because they did bad. So if you only have that show up in 2 scenes, 3 scenes, it's not a theme. I'm sorry, you don't deserve points for that.
Exactly.
Yeah, we are zipping through this. Why? Because if you have no substance,
we are.
right? If you have nothing to go off of, then you're not going to have anything to talk about. And that's the thing. Like, in a good story, you should have substance that people can look at and go, oh, there was so much here that was so interesting to talk about, right? Even though I personally hate, and I will say it again, I personally hate The Lighthouse as a film, right? And there was a whole long hour and a half discussion between me, Patrick, and Avalon on that. You can check that out in the other review. That movie is full of themes, right? And there's a reason the whole podcast was an hour and a half long, because there was so much to dig into there, even though I don't think the movie's a good movie. and so it's important to have themes, right? It adds a lot to the film. It adds thought provoking ideas. It lends to discussion. It lends to us thinking about how even something as fantastical as Asgard could have meaning in our own day to day lives, right? Because if this was a movie about honor or love or something else like that, we can understand that. We can understand what honor means in our day to day lives. We can understand what love means in our day to day lives. We talk about this a lot on the podcast, so we'll move on. What are your thoughts
Yeah.
on heightening the tension in this film, loss in this film? You have all of these bad things happen, all the way to the point where Loki gets stabbed in the chest with the other villain character that looks like a minotaur, and then he's dead. What were your thoughts, Andrew? Give me something. Give me some true, beautiful substance about the beauty of Thor: The Dark World.
Okay. I need to go to the side characters real quick here because this will make sense when I get here. I think that Loki is the only character in this movie that gets any sort of progression or character
Sure.
development. And in terms of heightened tensions, I think that all of the stakes that are raised in this movie are raised for Loki, not for Thor. Now, think about his mother's death, right? His mom dies. Thor does the Luke Skywalker where he looks at it, cries for a bit, and then moves on and joins the rebellion and never thinks about it again. Okay? Loki is the character who truly feels the weight of this loss. And you get it in probably the two best scenes in this movie. The first one is with Freya's funeral, and you get Fandral who comes in and he informs Loki of what happened. And Loki has that moment of rage. And it's the first time we really see true emotion evoked from Loki's character, okay? This is a sign of character progression for him. The second moment is when Thor comes to talk to him and asks him for help, and Loki talks to him in his normal manner, and Thor says, "I'm done with playing games." And you see Loki drops the illusion, and you see he is truly just at his end here. He is completely destroyed his room. His foot is cut open and bleeding. He does not give a crap about what's going on right now. He is in the pit of despair. Granted, I don't think that they did Loki's character amazing per se in this movie. We also get very little of him, but I think that in terms of raising the stakes, I think for Loki, this movie is the moment where his character starts to shift. Because the first movie, he's the selfish kid who just wants power. Avengers, he's the stereotypical villain. This movie, Thor: The Dark World, is where Loki truly starts to understand that his actions have consequences. In the first two movies, he doesn't really suffer the weight of his actions. The first movie, he escapes. The second movie, he gets taken prisoner, but to him, he's just I'll escape at some point. In this movie, he realizes that his action, sending that dark elf, whatever creature, in a certain direction, resulted in the only person in his life that he truly cared about dying. And you also have the fact that his last interaction with his mother, he pretty much just spat in her face. And so, in terms of heightening the tensions, I gave this some points because, they kill his mom, they kill off his brother. There are some things that go on here. I think it's similar. I referenced Luke Skywalker because it is raising the tensions, but not in the way that it is raising the tensions for the character, if that makes sense. It's like the idea of show, don't tell. We as the audience go, oh, his mom died. His brother died. Oh, that's horrible. But him as the character is not evoking the emotions you expect from someone who's lost their mother and their brother and could possibly lose the woman they love. All of these elements at play here, Thor should be an emotional wreck, but he's just
he's too good.
Whatever.
He's too
whereas
good.
Loki is very, yeah, yeah, totally. But Loki's very much evoking these types of emotions. And the thing that's great about it is at the end of the movie, he still usurps his father. And so there's still that push and pull. Loki's character hasn't truly developed into the hero that he becomes in the later movies, but that progression is there for his character. And so he does have development as opposed to Thor, who's just Thor.
Yeah, 100%. I like Loki as a character. and I think that they do really interesting things with him. My only real beef with him is what they already did in the first film, and we talked about this last time, but I'm going to point it out again because it happened again. And it is that they kill him off only to bring him back within the next 10 minutes, which is a problem
Yep.
if you want your audience to trust you. And this is once again the start of another set of things that they continue to do later in Marvel films. Oh my goodness, an important character to the series just died. Well, did they though? Did they though? Maybe they didn't. Maybe someone will come back to life. Maybe they just got grazed and they got unconscious or whatever, whatever. Like, that is basically what you get with a lot of characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe going forward. And so this is the start of that. That being said, with Loki, it kind of makes sense, right? So I don't hate it in this film, but it's very much like you kind of screwed me over on the first one by saying he died and then he didn't, and then you did it again in the second one. You ever think I'm going to trust you that Loki actually ever dies in the future? It's
I mean, I think that's the
No,
point, to
and
be
I think
completely
that
fair.
is too, and they start to recognize that in later Loki content, right? Especially when you come to the Loki TV series, they start to deal with a more like, hey, he's not going to die, but like everything else is just going to fall apart type situation, right? And trying to have other stakes involved to make it more, more or less other weights that he had to juggle in those scenarios. So you're not wrong, and which is why I go, I don't hate it, because he comes back and he usurps the throne. It's like, okay, that's a great, very Loki-esque character move. I liked it. I think it was very dynamic for him. And he was still meddling and doing his own thing in the midst of someone else's game, right? He was using someone else's game to his own ends. And that was very good. That being said, stop killing off people just to bring them back to life. It's just such a bad move. I'm even torn when I see it in things like with Jon Snow, and that's like the glorious moment for a lot of people. So
No.
I don't think bringing people back to life is hardly, if ever, appropriate to do, because it's you really need to build a good reason for it happening.
What's so interesting is, like, as someone who truly enjoys
Mm-hmm.
storytelling as an element, and thinking about all of the different parts that there are to storytelling, and specifically character development, it's so hard for me as someone who can get attached to a character for them to die, and like part of you
Mm-hmm.
wishes they weren't dead. But then when they bring them back, you go, "Oh shoot! Why'd you have to do that to me?" And so, like, Jon
Mm-hmm.
Snow's the perfect example of that, where I'm just like,
Right.
"Oh shoot!
Right.
Why'd you
Which
do
it is
that?"
ironic. No, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
And I
Finish
think
your thought.
from from my understanding, because I'm trying to remember. I read the books a while ago, and the books and the movies get muddled. I'm gonna be completely honest. Especially, or the book and the TV show, because I've seen the TV show like 3 times at this point. But Jon Snow doesn't die in the books. The last time we see Jon Snow is going to Hardhome,
Yeah,
so I don't
yeah, it's
actually know
not
if he ends up dying. But the show decided to give him the dramatic death at the end of season
something like that.
5, I want to say, yeah. And so that said, though, there are plenty of instances where a character will die and you go, "Oh shoot!" But it'd be better
Mm-hmm.
if they were to stay dead. And I think there are a few exceptions to this, right? I think Loki's an exception. I think the Winter Soldier is an exception, like where it
Mm-hmm.
made sense that you brought him back. Okay, he's a Hydra experiment. He's not truly the Bucky Barnes that we knew
Mm-hmm.
in the first Captain America movie. But then there are other instances where it's like,
Right.
why'd you do
Well,
that?
two things on that whole tangent.
Um,
One, it is kind of ironic that they did that in the Game of Thrones series, because George R. R. Martin himself is a heavy critic of Tolkien for doing that with Gandalf. So if DB Weiss and the boys ended up violating Martin's own theory on how things should be done, that's a rip diddly for him. But second off, oh shoot, now I forget what else I was gonna say. I was gonna say something. No, I don't know. So one of the things I've heard, which is I'm not fully convinced of it, but I think it's an interesting theory to throw around, is that generally when you're dealing with telling stories, right, you don't want good things to happen by chance for your protagonists. Okay? So, like, they are in a bad situation, they happen to find the lucky key that lets them out, right? Whatever that may be. On the flip side, though, it is okay to have bad things happen by happenstance. And all of that is a theory about raising the tension, right? Making things worse for the heroes and for the protagonists or the main characters in the film, so that they have to struggle through obstacles to achieve the goal they're trying to achieve. That's the idea behind it, right? And so I think, especially in the situation you just gave of the Winter Soldier, that makes sense, because the Winter Soldier, when he reappears, not being dead, he's also an enemy. He's not an ally, really, of the characters in the film, and that's part of the struggle. Is they have this new opponent who is very powerful, and then the problem is he's their friend and he doesn't remember, right? So it adds a very complex situation, and I think it's overall, well, we'll get to that when we review it on this podcast, so stay tuned. But things like that I think are more appropriate because it's adding extra conflict to the story. That's all. That's enough said. Needless to say, don't just kill off people and then bring them back to life. Yeah, I mean, looking at all that, do they have any big revelations in this movie? Any surprise endings? Did the hero change?
This point got absolutely nothing from me.
Wow, me too. That's crazy.
Absolutely nothing. In terms of transformation, I gave it a 0.1 out of 1 total point, because it says, does the main character change as a person? And I gave it like 0.1 because I was like, I guess technically he realizes he can't be king, but
True. I didn't even give him a 0.1 for that. And I'm not going to, because that's BS. Yeah. No, if you don't have a good baseline, you won't get a good ending. Shabing, shabang, shaboom. Did this movie leave you satisfied? Would you change your rating?
no.
There we go. All right. We're on to the very end. That's crazy. Oh my goodness. Look at how short this is. That's insane. We're going to be
How
at like
long
a solid
is it?
15 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. Is there a lasting impact to this film? They made 2 more. Thor is still a beloved character, even despite this film and your horrible, cruel rating of it, Andrew.
There are some movies, okay, where when I think about watching them, I just go, do I really have to? And it's like, there's some movies where I just go, no, I won't. It's a horrible movie. And then there's some where it's just like, ooh, I'm going to be so bored while watching this, except for like 5 scenes throughout the entire movie. And this is one of those movies where it's just like, I enjoy every minute of the movie that Loki is on screen.
Yeah.
Okay? He adds some great humor, some great contrast to Thor. He has great dialogue options, and there's great dialogue in the scenes that he's in. There's also the truly powerful moments where he is upset that he essentially kills his mom, and then the rest of the movie is just like, I'm gonna go on my phone right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, don't go on your phone, because then you can't give the movie the respect it deserves. No.
Well, we did this time, so
There you go. Yeah. I'm just gonna say, because I forgot about the side characters, I'm gonna go through the ones I care about real quick. We already talked about Odin. We already talked
sure.
about Loki.
Yeah, we'll do that.
The Warriors 3, once again, stock. Eric Selvig, kind of interesting, but also in the wrong ways. So not really. The characters that I actually thought were interesting in this film were, one, Frigga, his mom, who, she was interesting, but I felt like they were trying to build too much emotion too soon for her, and so you didn't have a lot of payoff for her sacrifice, which I think they really could have capitalized on if they had built her up more in the first one. But, they did decent considering all things with her, so I didn't have a ton of beef with her character. And then Sif, which Sif actually had some interesting stuff going on there. Kind of a shame that she just disappears until the 4th one after this. And, yeah, that's all I got. So What about you, Andrew?
I have synopsises for all of them. Jane. She misses her boy toy that she had for a total of like 4 days. That's her entire character. Darcy. She is an intern with her own intern.
I mean, that was just kind of funny,
Selvig.
and that was the whole point.
Yeah.
She's not supposed to be a complex character, you know, and she's
true.
So it's like, also, like, what does she contribute? I guess she kind of moves, like, connects pieces, but yeah. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
She's just there for comedic relief. Selvig, he's kind of going insane. That's about his entire character. I don't know that he actually adds anything to this movie whatsoever.
Well, he adds the sticks.
Sure. Sif, the ever horny Asgardian woman who had her boy toy stolen by a random woman on Earth.
Okay, keep going.
The thing that pisses me off is I think Sif actually could be interesting as a character in Asgard, but is not. The Warriors 3, literally their name is the most development they will ever get in these movies.
Nice.
Literally. Loki, we talked about him. Odin talked about him. Freya, I think she's actually great considering like what we actually get of her. I think that if they wanted to make her death more impactful, we needed to see more of her in the first movie, though.
Cool.
And so it's just like, we don't understand why Thor is so upset. Like, for all we know, he never was around her, and Loki was. It's like a Jacob Esau kind of situation.
Literally, yeah. Except they adopted Jacob.
True.
Anyways, there we go. We're giving it way too much symbolic meaning by just bringing up the Bible in that one. So that's the pod. We hope you all enjoyed. We will be back as we always are next week. We'll see you all next time.